welcome to Book 101 Review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's a writer, former therapist, strategist helping experts communicate with purpose, integrity, and impact. No other than Miss Laura Nicholls.
Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Miss Laura, and welcome on Book One Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much for being here, first of all. But yes, as you said, I'm a full-time writer. I am a single mom. I support my beautiful little family with the work that I do, helping business owners write all kinds of things. And I live here on Northern California coast and live a beautiful life.
A beautiful life indeed. And today let's talk about the power of a story, how visionary turn experience into impact. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Miss Laura, thank you. So tell us, why is a well told story a more powerful tool for a visionary than a bullet pointed list or facts or compelling data set?
Oh, that's such a great question. I love that. What a wonderful way to start. Well, I could say a lot about this. Your story shapes your identity, not only for yourself, but for the people you serve as a visionary, as a business owner, as a leader. When you share the truth of your lived experience, it helps other people make sense of their own. Um, and it becomes like a lens and it's a way of creating meaning. And your personal clarity that you create through your story often becomes someone else's insight. And in that, in your authenticity and telling your story, which is the most important part of that impact, in my opinion, is that your story isn't necessarily, as you mentioned, it's not a bulleted list and it's not a polished story. It's honest. And the impact comes from embracing that and all the parts of your story, the messy parts, the honest, the imperfect parts. That's what people can connect to. um, and I really see your story as service. It's your lived experience can become the blueprint for what someone else's possibility. Um, the visionaries, the leaders that I work with, that I help write books, they use their stories to teach, to comfort, to encourage, to guide, and to expand what other people believe is possible for themselves, which I think is some of the most beautiful part of the work. And in that journey of telling your story from wherever you were to wherever you got, there's a framework there, there's a process, there's something that you can dilute from your experience and give to other people to um, provide them a path from where they are, from where they see themselves, what they can relate to and connect with in your story, to where they'd like to be. Um, Meaning whatever that transformation is, whatever that place is that you've arrived in this place that you're serving from. um, again, you create something in understanding that you can help people take that journey, ideally in a shorter amount of time and with less pain and difficulty than you might have gone through in getting there. um, and I think that is what people connect to. It's not necessarily the transformation. I think, again, that's what inspires people. I think that, in my experience, that is again where they can see what might be possible for them that they hadn't even considered before. But what really creates the impact is the journey that came before that transformation. And again, that's what people connect to, and what becomes your unique messaging, your way of serving, and really your proprietary process as a business owner or visionary.
Miss Laura, The
Hmm.
visionaries turn experience into impact. What is the essential alchemy in that process? How does a raw personal experience get refined into a story that serves a larger purpose?
I think the first step in that is identifying that when I talk about this, sometimes people think that the story needs to be something really big and dramatic and traumatic. And that's just not the case. I think the first step in that, the alchemy, if you will, and I love that word, is recognizing that you have a story, like that wisdom is already in there, and it doesn't necessarily need to be something big and flashy. It's your lived experience, and acknowledging that and really reflecting on that and realizing that your story is what will reflect to you what you're meant to teach and what you're meant to create and contribute and how you're meant to serve. And when you build from that truth, instead of, when getting back to your bullets and your strategies that you mentioned in your first question, when you build from the truth of your lived experience, that's where the impact is. That is what is uniquely yours, that you have to bring to the world. And so again, like, there's that process of acknowledging that piece of it, and then also taking the time to sit down and think about what was that, again, that process that you went through to come through that story, no matter what that looks like. What is this place of arrival that you're in, and how can you reflect back and communicate that in some kind of framework that can support and serve others?
Often the most powerful stories come from places of vulnerability or failure. How does a visionary know which personal wounds are meant to be shared as a gift to others and which it should be remain private?
That's another great question. I think that in telling your story, there is an element of humility and curiosity. I think that's what people connect to, when you are coming into admitting the things that you don't know, being willing to ask the questions about yourself, showing that vulnerability, and in the context, in the lens of, is this going to serve other people? I know that I go through this, and I'm just in the having been writing for 8 years, I'm just in the process of doing my own writing and creating my own book. And so this is something I've been personally wrestling with: is how much do I share and how much do I not? Um, when we share our stories, of course, there is a transformative piece for ourselves, but we aren't using our stories as our own. I mean, you can, but it's not meant to be just your own therapy or your own trauma dumping. I think that it really has to be, again, looked at through the lens of, like, how is this something that other people can connect with? Is it something that I'm ready to tell? And is there some way that this truth is will serve those who are reading?
Interesting, Miss Laura. Defining a visionary storyteller. What separates a person who tells stories from visionary who uses a story as a leadership tool? Is
Mm.
it intent, the structure, or the effect?
Can you repeat the last part of the question?
Is it intent, the structure, or the effect?
Is it so just if I am understanding correctly, is the intent the impact, is what you're asking?
Yes, as a
Yeah.
visionary storyteller.
Um, yeah, absolutely. I think that when I talk about visionaries, or when I think about them, I think about people who are doing meaningful work in the world. Um, and every person who I've helped write a book, except for one, they
Mhm.
were just telling their memoir just for the sake of telling their memoir. But even in that case, it was a legacy for his children. But in most cases, the intent is impact. It's also, and when we talk about impact, we're thinking about service, right? We're talking about changing lives. We're talking about bringing meaning. But I think there's also an important part of that impact is teaching. Um, and again, this idea of helping people who might see themselves in their story. And I'm always saying, like, you never know who might need to hear your story, and therefore it needs to be told. And so I think there is a great deal of intent in wanting to, again, create that opportunity for people to see the possibility for themselves and to connect with you and be inspired and validated and comforted that it's not just them. And to oversimplify it, it's if that person can do it, so can I. And that's where the humanity of your story comes in.
Yes, definitely. So, Miss Laura, in a visionary story, the villain is not always a person. What are the most compelling non human antagonists you've seen, like inertia, ignorance,
Mhm.
or a broken system? And how are they effectively personified?
Mm. It's the antagonist I often see is one's own ego. And
True. Too much
yeah,
ego.
yeah, and again, there's that authenticity piece that because we all carry that. We all carry kind of some version of that and how we can get in our own ways. I most often see that theme as the antagonist. I have worked, you mentioned systems, for example. I have helped people write books that were really putting a stake in the ground against, for example, the public school paradigm here in the United States. It was created out of in a place when we needed to create people who would go to work, and so therefore it wasn't really designed for children. And so I have seen and worked with circumstances where there was kind of like this bigger systemic antagonist, if you will. But more often than not, it is um, it is really one's own demons in their own personal battle more than something external, I would say.
External for sure. And Miss Laura, how do you coach leaders to incorporate sensory details to make a story transport transportive rather
Hmm,
than just informative?
sure. Another great question. Some of the books topics that I write about are fairly dry, that I help people write, I should say.
Hmm.
Meaning there, when we talk about business processes, that could be email security, it could be designing data, excuse me, designing dashboards for data. Some of it is not, it's not something that you would think would be very engaging, and therein lies the art, because that process, where there's 200 pages of teaching something, is going to be so much more relatable, and it's going to be internalized so much more when there are the sensory pieces. And the sensory piece is the story. It's again, the personal anecdotes. Even if there's not a long, like, memoir style arc throughout that teaching, it is, again, even those people who are teaching those, I hate to call them that, but kind of dry topics in their book content, are teaching through anecdote. They're teaching through their lived experience. They're teaching, just worked on one today where she was teaching through the failures that she had experienced and kind of the pain of what that's like. And that's something that we can all relate to. Making mistakes in our work, whatever that work looks like. And it's almost, it's almost a rite of passage, right? That we have those failures and those pain points. And therein lies, again, the really important piece of the authenticity behind the teaching, and the human experience. And I think that in that I've seen, I guess my bigger point is that I've seen even very, very dry topics come to life because of the humanity and the authenticity that it was brought in through personal story.
Miss Laura, how does a visionary core story change and mature as they and their organizations grow? How do you keep it fresh and relevant without losing its authentic core?
Hmm. I think what comes to mind first is having a little bit of distance on it. I think for anybody, when you are in the story, you don't see it. Um, Maybe you have some awareness that you're in it, but until you have some time between you and these milestones that we meet in our story, you don't have a full understanding of the impact yet. I think it's a reflecting back. And so when it comes to keeping a visionary's story relatable and fresh, I mean, ideally, whether it's business or life, we're all always growing, I hope. I know there are people who maybe aren't and they're kind of stagnant in their life, but in an ideal world. And in that path of growing and evolving, again, whether it's business or life, there are these points in time where we can look back and see things that we didn't recognize in the moment and see that um, these actions we've been taking, these things we've been doing have had these certain impacts. And so I think it's keeping an awareness of like these checkpoints and checking in with yourself and reflecting back. And sometimes that also I've observed takes sometimes other people to point that out to help visionaries see that um, that they there has been some significant shift that maybe they don't recognize themselves. So perspective, I would say, reflection and perspective are how an impactful story stays relevant.
Miss Laura, as a writer, former therapist, strategies, what are your short term and long term goals?
Short term are I'm really just loving the work that I'm doing with books and expanding into working with different types of visionaries and different types of business owners and just a real um, yeah, just a really interesting range of people. And so I'm short term looking at expanding that piece and just continuing to connect with people and continuing to help people tell their stories and teach and bring their message into the world. Um, Long term, as a former therapist, I was involved in helping kids work with horses, and so I'm actually in process with a trauma informed certification to get back to some of that work. And so that is not separate necessarily from the work I do as a writer. I feel like this work that I am doing, I don't know how those pieces fit together yet. I'm a big believer in the how is none of our business. If we just stay in motion and keep moving in the direction of our dreams. And I do have this vision of getting back to working with kids and families and horses here in my community, kids who are at risk, kids who are in need, and there really isn't a lot in this area for them. And so I see the work that I do as a writer as supporting that and helping me bring that to fruition. So that is a longer term goal that I'm starting to see come into reality, which is exciting.
Exciting for sure, and good luck to your goals and looking forward for more success, Miss Laura. And what would be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Um, who want to be like me? um, Stay in motion. Don't, yeah, there's so much I could say about this, but to not stay in motion for the sake of staying in motion, but to be attuned to inspired action. Um, and I think when I just touched on this earlier, when we stop, one of the biggest shifts I've experienced is getting out of the grind and the survival. I part of my story is that I started my business from a place of crisis, having been in a women's shelter, and my daughter was a baby, and I lost all my possessions. I built my business from literally ground zero. I had no possessions or income, and as a result, I stayed in survival mode for quite a while in my business, and really would get stuck in the how of how things were going to happen for me. And so my encouragement to others would be to, when you stop worrying about the how and when you start believing and you just start really trusting in the vision of how you want to serve and who you are and your value and your truth, and the how just shows up. And that's what I mean by staying in motion, just staying in that faith and just knowing, having a deep knowing that as long as you continue to move forward, the how will reveal itself. I think the more we get caught up in that, the more stagnant we become. and we fail to move forward when we get too worried about how it's all going to work out, because it always does.
Thank you for the advice, Miss Laura. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence you, Johnny?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's called The Wisdom of Big Bird, which is maybe not what you were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
The tagline to that is "And the Dark Genius of Oscar the Grouch," and it was written by the gentleman who played both of those characters on Sesame Street. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful example. It's just a lovely book. It's actually yellow like the Big Bird. I don't think it's in print anymore, but it's such a
Mm-hmm.
beautiful example of um, a memoir. It's a kind of a life guide. It's a reflection. There's so much wisdom about um, just, you know, staying true to what matters, the messiness and the complexity of life. Um, yeah, and just the wisdom that lies in everyone's lived experience.
Thank you for that recommended book, Miss Laura. And before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people. My other podcast, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well, geography 101, love letters, movie 101 review, music 101 are in fourth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in second season, and my baby podcast, Law 101, Mental Health 101, and my Bible Verses 101. Now, please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Laura, if you could issue one challenge to our listeners to start harnessing the power of a story in their own lives and work this week, what would it be?
Hmm. I would challenge people to sit down, not at a keyboard, but with an actual pen and a paper. There is something that happens when we slow down and actually form the words with our hands on paper, and just start, even if it's very rough, even if it feels intimidating or weird or scary to sit down with a piece of paper, but to just start writing rough thoughts, rough notes about what journey you've been on and what how that can serve others. That would be my challenge.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, Miss Laura Nicholls. Thank you. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your business, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Oh, sure. Well, you can find out all about me on my website. I'm not sure if that's what you're asking.
Mm-hmm,
Uh,
please.
yeah, it's lauranichols.com. I'm also quite active over on LinkedIn and sharing some of the good things that are happening with horses and people and writing books. Yeah, so
Yes.
invite people to follow along over there.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Laura Nichols because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering books will rise. More and more empowering advocacy will come. So, Miss Laura, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
More to come, people. See you soon.